Hello, my name's Daniel, and this is my presentation on my study of a modern ransomware called Jigsaw. So first, let's go over what ransomware is. Ransomware is a type of malicious software or malware that encrypts files. Basically, this means that it locks your files and prevents you from accessing them unless you have the decryption key. This decryption key usually requires some sort of payment to the author or the attacker that sent you this ransomware, and it may also delete those files if you don't pay. It's primarily spread through spam emails or phishing attempts, and the things that are most vulnerable are people with lack of experience with spamming or phishing and older systems with outdated software. So next, I'm going to go over the experimental setup and the goals of the experiment. So the environment that I used was a Windows 7 Enterprise virtual machine, which can be obtained from Microsoft's website. And then to get the Jigsaw ransomware itself, I got it from a GitHub repository called the Zoo. Basically, this is just a public collection of malware that can be used for study and analysis. And then additionally, I set up some user dummy data within the virtual environment. And then I'm also under the assumption that Jigsaw has already been downloaded from an email already. And so the two goals of this experiment is to first stimulate Jigsaw ransomware within a virtual environment and observe the effects it has on the system. And then two, to defend against Jigsaw. This involves removing it from the PC, using a decryptor specific to Jigsaw, and then other defense methods that I'll go over towards the end of the demonstration. So now let's go into the demonstration. So to start off, I'm going to briefly talk about the setup that I have here. I have some folders on the desktop here that are essentially just some test user data. So in this folder, I have some text data. This is just some random hex data that I generated. And then in here, I just have a text file that says this is some very important information. And in this folder, I have an album of images. And so we can use this data to see how it gets encrypted and changed. And so now I'm going to navigate to the actual malware itself. And then when I execute it, we're going to see that a pop-up comes up. It's just some generic "you've won something" pop-up, but it's fake. And if we go into processes, we can see that Jigsaw disguises itself as either Dropbox or Firefox, and it's going to very quickly start to eat up all of my CPU. And you can see my CPU is over 90%. And so if I let this run for a little bit, we can look at our data and see how it's changed. So if we look at this data folder, or first let's look at the images. We can see all of our images are encrypted with a .fun extension. If we look at our data, if we try and open it, it's not going to let us. And even if we try to use Notepad, if we open it, it's just a bunch of gibberish. And so how can we get rid of this ransomware? First, we need to end the process itself. And we can do that through Task Manager. And then it's different for every ransomware, but you also need to delete the files that it installs on your computer. So an example of this is that it installs firefox.exe. If you look at the properties, the original name of this file is Bitcoin Blackmailer, which is the original name of Jigsaw. And so this would be a file that you need to delete on your system. But even if you delete all of this, all of your files are still encrypted. So how can you get access to those files again? Well, you can download a decryptor specific to whatever ransomware. And in this case, it's the Jigsaw decryptor. And you can navigate, in this case, I'm going to navigate to the data folder. And then I'm just going to let this decrypt. And now that it's decrypted, we can see we have our files back and we can open it. And we can see here, this is some very important information. We have our information back. Now there is some things we can do to prevent this from happening in the first place. The important thing is to download some sort of antivirus. You can see that I have no antivirus on this computer, and that's a pretty important step to prevent this from happening in the first place. To conclude, I chose to study a modern ransomware like Jigsaw because it directly affects data. Unlike some other attacks, which might just prevent you from accessing a website and not really affect your data, ransomware is dangerous because it can make you lose all of your data, or even worse, it can make a company lose all of their data in a database. In fact, I found that 61% of businesses experienced a ransomware attack last year in 2020. The most common medium of malware distribution is through email, and ransomware follows this trend and is almost primarily spread through email. Because of this, given its prevalence, knowing how ransomware spreads and the possible defenses against it is important, especially considering the growing integration of online and virtual services in our lives. Knowing how to prevent and recognize cyber attacks is very important. To wrap up, these are the resources that I used. I got the Windows virtual machine from Microsoft's website. I got the Jigsaw ransomware from the Zoo GitHub repository. And I got the Jigsaw decryptor from the Bleeping Computer security website. This is the article that I referenced. And that's it. Thank you for watching.